We'll hear a beep.
Welcome to the launch webinar of the Aspiring to Middle Leadership programme. My name's Louise Sanders and I'm a lead specialist in the professional learning and leadership team at Education Scotland. And I'll hand over to David.
Hi everyone, I'm David Burgess. I'm Senior Lead Specialist with the Education Scotland Professional Learning and Leadership team. And welcome to the recorded webinar for the AML launch. On the screen you'll see Leslie Walker, who is off work at the moment, but is a key part of the team and has supported the development of the programme. And also Nicola McGuff, who is our business support assistant, and she's the one that will be in contact with you, and you'll recognise her name from emails. And they are key members of the AML team. And you'll see the hashtag at the bottom for Twitter, hashtag EdScotML. Please feel free to tag us in any tweets. So in the session today, we're going to run through the programme, talk a little bit about online learning, highlight the expectations, talk through the programme and webinar objectives, talk around the national model of professional learning, highlight effective middle leadership, look at a self-evaluation activity which you'll be asked to do to support you in the programme, show you how to access the resources, and talk about networking and the next steps expected. There will be times during the session we'll say to you to pause and have a look at something in a bit of detail to support you in the engagement. So to start with, online learning, this is an online programme. Obviously, you know, pedagogy, we talk about andragogy, so planning adult learning, but we're also highlighting here heutagogy, so student-centred instructional strategies and leadership. So basically thinking about you making that time to find space and time for your learning. The programme is designed so you can engage at any particular point. You can engage the learning, you can find a time to start, you can save it and come back to it. You don't have to do it in one sitting. It's entirely up to you how you approach it. We would encourage you to think carefully about when you can find that time, carve that time out for you, be a little bit selfish about it and have that time so you can really engage in the learning. We'd also encourage you to journal. We always think we're going to remember information, but actually when we're engaged in professional learning, we don't often. So I'd encourage you to find a time to just journal something down, write down what was important, what resonated and why. There's research out there about the importance of journaling that allows your brain to process, and also research about handwriting instead of typing, you know, in terms of actually retaining information. However, we would just encourage you to do whatever worked best for you to do that. And also networking, you know, whilst you'll be studying individually, we'd encourage you to connect with colleagues and peers who are involved in the programme, or not, even share your learning with others in your school or your setting, and just kind of let them know what you're doing. And it's important to network, so we'll talk a little bit further about that later on in the webinar as well.
Okay, so just invite you to pause for a second and think about your expectations for the programme and just write them down somewhere. So if you do have a journal, just write them down, and what we'll do during the next couple of months is we'll invite you to actually revisit these expectations and see if your hopes and expectations are being met. So just spend a couple of minutes, pause the slide and just think about your expectations from the programme and from your learning this session. I'll just take you through the programme objectives. So first of all, you'll be learning about current research around the roles of middle leadership, and we'll talk you through that at this webinar. And you'll learn about your own strengths and your areas for development as an aspiring middle leader based on the roles, based on the six roles that we'll talk to you about. As David said, we'll also invite you to make connections with each other and to network with colleagues, both in the programme, but also perhaps network with colleagues that you wouldn't normally network with, either in your own school, local authority, or your RIC. The launch webinar objectives. So at this session, you'll meet your programme leads, that's us. You'll also think about the influences on and the impact of middle leadership. I think we agree that the middle leadership role is really important. So you'll just think about these two things. And you'll also learn about the research related to the roles of middle leadership, and specifically about the research of John Denoble. And as said, you'll plan a self-evaluation activity related to these roles.
Okay, so we're just going to talk you through the National Model of Professional Learning. Hope you'll recognise that. It's quite often it'll be up in a wall somewhere, maybe in the staff room behind the photocopier. But the National Model underpins the programme alongside the research of John DeNoble. And in the National Model, which was launched about 3 or 4 years ago, and in the email, there'll be a link to the National Model so you can explore it in much more detail within the Education Scotland Professional Learning website. In the National Model, we've got learning at the heart, and that's learning of children, young people and adult learners, but also the education professional. So learning has to be at the heart of any work that we're doing. At the very outset, you can see the leadership of and for learning. That is about making sure that whatever professional learning we undertake has an impact on outcomes for young people. It's about that, the leadership of learning at all levels within education. The next circle is about the professional standards, so highlighting that any professional learning we undertake should be related to those standards that can be aspirational in terms of how we're working towards achieving them, and linking in our learning to make sure that we're working towards elements of those standards, whatever they are. If you're a teacher, the GTCS standards, but it could be CLPL standards, it could be the middle leadership standards. But if you're not within GTCS, it could be SSSC. So it depends on where you are in your setting, but there will be standards to kind of work towards, and they should be reflected in the learning you're undertaking. And then you can see we've got learning as collaborative, learning by inquiry, and learning that deepens knowledge and understanding. And so professional learning should include aspects of those, if not all of them, elements of them all within the learning you're undertaking. Some might be more dominant than others. However, through this programme, you're talking about learning by inquiring, because you're inquiring into your own strengths and areas for development and thinking about your next steps. You're inquiring into the areas that you want to explore further within mid-leadership. Learning is collaborative because you're working alongside other colleagues, and that's the importance of networking. Whilst you can learn individually, it's important to reflect and think about how you are connecting with and what resonates with you, and also challenging yourself with others and hearing from other people about what they've taken from it. And learning that deepens knowledge and understanding. So the learning you undertake really deepens your knowledge and then leads to that impact on outcomes for young people. So the National Model is a key element of the programme, and we just ask you to think about, as you're going through the programme, how the learning you're undertaking reflects and is underpinned by that National Model.
Okay, so we're going to ask you to think now about the influences on effective middle leadership. So there's 3 questions here on the slide. First question, what influences the effectiveness of middle leaders? Second question, what roles do middle leaders carry out? And third question, what impact do effective middle leaders have? So we're going to invite you just to think about these 3 questions, and if you can use the QR code, you can join a Padlet, and you'll see that this has already been populated before, but type your thoughts into the Padlet and you can begin to see the complexity of the roles of middle leaders. And this isn't meant to overwhelm you, but it's more just so you can see the complexity and just what's involved in the different roles of middle leaders. So again, just pause the slides and just spend 10-15 minutes just having a look and adding your own thoughts to this.
If you don't have a QR code scanner, the link will be in the email that the webinar was sent out with as well, so you can click the link in the email. But as Louise said, just pause the video and spend 10 or 15 minutes looking over that and adding your thoughts to that Padlet.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk you briefly through the theoretical model of middle leadership in schools. And this was developed by John DeNoble from Macquarie University in Australia in 2017. And this model actually underpins all our middle leadership programs. So from collaborative middle leadership through to middle leaders leading change and this aspiring to middle leadership program. So as you thought about on the Padlet, you thought about influences on the role of middle leaders. And for this, John de Noble has put input, so it's really the same thing. And so you'll see here, he's put principal support. So as this is an Australian model, that's for that read head teacher. So head teacher support has a huge influence or input. Also professional development or professional learning. The professional learning of a middle leader has a massive influence on how effective they are. The school culture has a huge influence. You can be a really, really effective middle leader, but if the school culture isn't supporting your professional learning and supporting you to carry out these roles, that can be quite tricky. So school culture has a huge influence, as well as enthusiasm and drive. And you'll see on the Padlet that a lot of people have mentioned personality and just how the middle leader is and how they behave. And actually that does have a big influence as well on their effectiveness. And then knowledge of CP&A, that's knowledge of curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. So as middle leaders, you are also teachers. So you have to have that really thorough, that deep knowledge that David talked about when he was talking about the National Model of Professional Learning. So think about that deep knowledge of curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. And because this is an evolving model, there's other. So obviously, as you've seen in the previous activity, there are other influences on the role of middle leaders. So thinking about the roles then, you'll see these initials across the top. So they're student focused, administrative, organisational, supervisory, staff development and strategic. So student focus is, as it says on the tin, so that's focus on children and young people, on their learning, on their pastoral care, just everything that involves the learners. And that also John de Noble has identified another related role to this, and that's working with parents and working with partners and working with the community. So that's almost a sort of separate role, but also is actually linked to all these roles. Then the administrative role, that's about really sort of paperwork, data, all those sort of things that go with admin. But this doesn't stand alone. So for example, an admin task where you're scrutinizing some data, you can look at what needs doing in terms of perhaps a curriculum area and student progress, and that could lead to a strategic piece of work or a strategic role. So all these roles are really interlinked. And then the organizational role, that's more about organizing people. So for admin, think sort of things, and for organizational, think people. So making sure that the right people are working with the right children and the right young people. And then supervisory, that's working with your team and those classroom observations, those learning visits, all that sort of supervisory role. And that is very closely linked to staff development. So as a middle leader, you're leading the professional learning of others. You may be leading PRDs, any of that staff development role to ensure that children and young people are receiving the very best teaching and learning. And then on the right-hand side, there's the strategic role. And again, this is interlinked with the other roles, but may be actually more prevalent at some times of year than others. So perhaps when you're working on the school improvement plan or things like that, the strategic role may come to the fore, whereas at other times of year, there may be more student focus or admin and so on. And then underneath, you'll see the how of middle leadership. So the leading teams, the managing relationships, the managing time, the communicating effectively, the managing self and other reflects the probably just about everything that you've seen in the Padlet. And then you'll see the managing and leading continuum at the top. And that's not to say that student focus is always about managing. You know, this is a continuum. So sometimes you may be working more in a managerial role, but other times you may be taking on more leadership responsibilities. So it's a very fluid model, but it does allow us to actually identify the complex roles and really where they sit. So we'll just move on to the outputs or to the impact. So going back to the Padlet, think about the impact of the middle leader. So teaching quality, the middle leader has a huge influence on teaching quality of the teams that they lead. So going back to that supervisory role, that staff development role, that has a massive impact on how teachers teach and how young people learn. And then teacher attitudes. Middle leaders model that attitude, that love of teaching and learning, that love of professional learning. And that has a big influence on the teachers that they work with. And student outcomes, all this has a huge impact on student outcomes and it has to be about students and learners at the centre. And then, as with the other columns, there's the other, because there are other influences or impacts as well. And there will be a copy of this in the team space if you want to refer to it as well. Okay, so that's been a lot of talking, and we just invite you to pause now and just to go and have a little break, just to think about the things that you've heard, and come back in sort of 5 or 10 minutes.
Thanks, Lisa. It might be worth as well just reflecting and journaling any thoughts around the model that you've seen, what resonates with you, what challenges you, and just kind of record those. And what we're going to do now is going to start to use that model to populate a coaching wheel. And again, within the email, there'll be a link to this, a blank coaching wheel, but it's also in the team space. And this is going to form the self-evaluation aspect of the webinar. And you can see on the coaching wheel there, you may have come across coaching wheels or not, but the coaching wheel gives you a very visual representation of where you feel you are. And you can see the 8 blank boxes around the wheel there. We'd invite you to fill the blank boxes with 6 of them with the roles of John de Novo. So putting in student focused, administrative, organisational, supervisory, staff development and strategic. And that would leave you 2 blank boxes. Now you could look at the standards of middle leadership, and again there's a link in the email to the standards, which are refreshed in August. But you can look at those standards and identify from those standards maybe a couple of aspects that you'd like to focus on. The key bit is about using the roles of John de Novo as the starting point. And as you can see in the middle, there's a 0, and the outside there's a 10. So somebody who's completing that would be looking and thinking, if you're really feeling quite confident about it, you put a mark on the line at 10. And if you weren't confident at all, you put 0. And you're just kind of rating where you believe you are in terms of confidence in relation to that role on that line between 0 and 10. And then the next slide, you'll see that there's a completed version here for you to have a look at. If you look at this version, this individual has completed it, and they've put in the 6 roles of John de Novo. So student focus right at the top, round to strategic, and they've put in 2 from the standards, and they could be anything, but they've put in about promoting a culture of CLPL, and they've also put in the support and design of curriculum. So they're looking at kind of curriculum and rating themselves where they believe they are with that. So if you look at this one, this individual has rated themselves feeling pretty confident around the student focus role. Okay, so they feel quite confident with that, but in terms of administrative, they've put themselves a little bit further down. They're not quite as focused or confident on the administrative role. Organisationally, they feel quite strong as well, kind of in the middle, so they're certainly feeling stronger than administrative, but still a bit of development around there. Staff development, they don't feel particularly confident, so again, quite low kind of score for themselves, so they're seeing there that actually that's an area to focus on. And they feel similarly strong and confident around supervisory and strategic. So they've identified where they think they are, and they've kind of put the mark on for the leading in a culture of CLPL, which potentially could link into that staff development piece that they don't feel quite as strong and confident in there. And they've put a fairly strong mark around the kind of curriculum. When they put the mark in, they've then just drawn a line to connect all those. And what you see is a very clear visualization of where that individual feels they are at the moment, and it's a snapshot at the moment around those different roles. You can see in the top left, they've also dated it. They've dated this for September 21. And that means that what they can do is they can come back at a later point and double map. They can go back and put on another point in time where they believe they are at that point, and they can then quickly see whether they have moved forward or whether they've gone backwards. Now, sometimes that can happen, because if you feel confident in a particular area and then you look into it a bit more and you research it a bit more, you start sometimes to question, well, actually, maybe I'm not quite as strong in that as I thought I was, and that's okay. But this is a starting point for your engagement in the Aspiring to Middle Leadership programme. So on the blank wheel that you have, we'd invite you after the webinar just to spend a bit of time to look at those roles and think, okay, so based on the input from the webinar, where do I think my strengths are? Am I feeling confident in the student focus role, working with children and young people? Do I feel my strength is in the administrative, so the things and dealing with spreadsheets and information and data? Do I feel my strength is in the organisational, allocating the right staff to the right classroom? Would I feel confident with that in terms of dealing with rota and knowing my team? Would I feel confident with staff development? Is that something I think, yeah, I could definitely do that. I can definitely support staff, and I can put in the direction of CLPL. I can lead career-long professional learning within the area that I would be leading. Do I feel confident in supervisory, the quality assurance aspect, classroom observations, classroom visits, attendance management aspects? Do I feel confident in strategic and leading a vision and values of the department or faculty that I would be in charge in? So these are the things to think about and just reflect. And on the blank coaching wheel, we invite you after the webinar to map out where you think you are. And then that will be the basis of your starting point with the programme, because the programme is a series of professional learning activities related to those different roles. And you may want to focus on the role that you feel less confident in. You may want to focus on the areas that you do feel confident in, because the research again highlights that if you put a lot of effort into improving weaknesses, it will improve a bit. If you put the same level of effort into improving strengths, it will grow continually. So don't forget about the strengths that you have, but we would encourage you to carry that activity as a starting point for your engagement in the programme. And when you've done that, then what you can do is log in to the Professional Learning website. And I'm going to share my screen and I will show you. Okay, the Professional Learning website here, and you can see the link at the top of the screen. And we will go to Learn. We're going to go to Browse All Learning Activities and log in to there. When you log in to the website, it will take you to your account. You will not have an AML program because there's no program area for AML, because all the learning is held within the learning activities. So you won't see any programs here, but you will see the Browse All Learning Activities. When you click on to Browse All Learning Activities, it will take you through to this, and you can select by area, so teacher leadership. We're going to focus on middle leadership, and we're going to click on Find. And you'll see that in here, because I've worked through a lot of these programme professional learning activities, that they've moved up into the in progress, but you might not have the in progress section. It will just be filtered results, and you'll see resources down here. The professional learning activities that you're looking for are the roles of middle leadership. So you can see it up here because I've worked through to check them. We have the roles of middle leadership: 6, strategic role, staff development role is 5, supervisory role is 4, student focus role is 1, administrative role 2, and organisational role 3. So if I click on organisational role, you'll see that it takes you to the learning outcomes. It'll tell you what they're looking to achieve with this, highlights the standards, the GTCS standards, and shows you how it links in. And then there are different steps for each session, each professional learning activity, and there are different links. So this one has a link to Higgius, also has a link to a video about Steve Jobs, tells you about the background. You just click on the link to go to that, and then there are questions to complete as you progress through. Once you've done that, you move on to the next step, and you can save at any point, you can come back to any point. You don't have to do it in one sitting, okay? And so here are, again, another video from Alma Harris. Again, you can see that there are links in here in terms of the questions that you would complete. Okay, and for each learning activity, there are different steps to complete. All right, and we would just invite you to work your way through those in your own time based on your self-evaluation. Which professional activity you start with will be the one that you decide based on your self-evaluation, because this is about you.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about middle leadership communities. So we've created a Twitter feed specifically for educational middle leaders called #MiddleLeadMonday. So if you are on Twitter, we'd invite you to tweet on a Monday and anything to do with middle leadership. So anything that you've read, anything that you found interesting, and any thoughts around your learning. We've also created a Microsoft Teams community for aspiring middle leaders, and that's again for you to share with others. So share any resources, any thoughts, and if you want, you can contact each other and actually set up your own meetings. It's entirely up to you. It's your area to communicate with each other. I would say at this point, if you do have anything technical or any questions that you need to communicate with us, email us directly. So don't use that to communicate with us, because we may well miss it. So these are two ways that you could communicate, but also, as I said earlier, it's really important that you share your learning with people that you're working with as well. So if you do have that opportunity just to discuss your learning and share what's on the program. So thinking about next steps then, this is the introductory webinar. So that's the first thing done. And then, as David said, we'd invite you to spend some time on the self-evaluation activity, and this will inform your choice of PLAs. Then we'd invite you to work through at least 2 professional learning activities. I mean, there are 6 there, and you may actually find other professional learning activities that you're really interested in as well. So that's entirely up to you, but the core ones for this program are the 6 that are based around John Denoble's Roles of Middle Leadership. And then we'll invite you to come and join us for one of the Touchpoint sessions. So there's a choice of 4 at the end of October and beginning of November. And then the final Sharing the Learning session. And these are both more for you to talk to each other about your learning, to share your learning. You won't be expected to come with a massive presentation or anything. It's just more about discussion. You'll be put into breakout rooms with small groups just to share your learning and to learn from each other. So finally then, as I said, if you need to contact us out with the team, please email edspll@educationscotland.gov.scot. And we're delighted you're on the programme and look forward to seeing you in October or November at the Touchpoint session. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've put a couple of links in the email with this, including a short video about how to access Teams through Glow. We do know it can be challenging for some local authorities to access Glow, but there's a video there to watch first, to try all the different actions there to try and get access to it. But all the information will be in the email. But as Louise said, please get in touch with us if there's anything else. Thanks for watching.